You've joined the Betamax Video Club, rewinding back to our favourite films of the 1980s. My name's Rich Nelson, and today I've rented Superman 3. Watching it with me is the author Mark O'Connell. Hi Mark, how are you?
I'm good. I'm ready to talk Krypton. I'm up for this.
Brilliant. One of your books, Watching Skies, touches on Superman quite a bit. What's so special about Superman 3 for you?
I don't know why everyone shouldn't have their own answer to that immediately, but ultimately, standing back, Superman 3 is like a lot of franchises. Like, you've got Star Trek 3, Jaws 3, Return of the Jedi. For me, I was slightly that generation where Superman 3 was around my life more than perhaps Superman the movie and Superman 2 were, because Superman 3 emerged. I remember the release. I remember the posters in all the cinema lobbies. So I'm sort of defending it and thinking it's kind of special because it's the one that I may have hung out with a lot more than Superman the movie and Superman 2, which sounds like heresy when I say it like that. But I've got a little... It's like the slightly cheeky, tacky cousin, who I quite like to hang out with. You always had a cousin or a best mate that would get you into sort of trouble, and I think Superman 3 is my soul-kind version of that.
I'd have to agree with you. I think sort of growing up when I did, this was the one that I probably saw the most. I think it always seemed to be on ITV.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure whether it was just because it was pitched a little bit differently, certainly from Superman the movie, but Superman 2 as well. It was because it was that much more slapstick. There were so many more light scenes in there compared to, again, the first one.
Yes.
And growing up, it just seemed to be almost what you'd expect a comic book movie to be, the whole sort of conflict between Superman and Clark Kent and Richard Pryor, which I suppose at the time I didn't think anything different other than he's a bloke in a Superman film. It's not no controversy or anything like that.
Yeah, I never know. Like you say, I never noticed that it was sort of pitched and framed as a Richard Pryor film. In later life, I suddenly realised that was the Sorkinds, modus operandi. That was what they did. They would have a film about Musketeers or Santa Claus or Superman or Supergirl, but they would pick bigger names and sort of pepper the film with bigger box office names, because they were very business. They knew the box office business, the Sorkinds, and I kind of admire them for that. They maybe cut a few corners, and how many times do we have to see that guy in the plaid shirt walking in that establishing shot? Even as a kid, I'm thinking, we've seen this bit before in like one of the other films. But yeah, I had no problem with Pryor. Perhaps looking at it now, there's an overbalance, and there's a sort of sense he's improvising a lot of his scenes. Because I imagine, I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but I know Richard Pryor had a lot of demons with his various vices, and it does slightly feel like a film he will never remember filming. But I do like the sense of comedy about it. It's very much a tonal shift, and you're right about that's interesting. You're right that it's a comic book. I mean, I always say, and I would defend it more, that obviously Superman the movie is the definitive comic book cinema template, even more so. And in fact, when I think there's three templates actually in superhero movies, and they are Superman the movie, Batman 89, and I would now say Joker. So I just think that's a stunning piece of art and cinema. And often superhero films aren't art and cinema, but I do think Superman the movie, Batman 89 and Joker very much tick that box. Superman 3 less so, I'll give it that, but it's for a third film. What I like about those 80 Superman films particularly is they are a Superman movie. We don't, even when we have Justice League and Man of Steel, we seem to can't get out of the origin. Setting it up, and that's what I like about Superman 3 particularly. We don't need a setup. We don't even have the villain set up. He's already, Robert Vaughn's already doing his blingy, Great Gatsby, slightly Hackman shtick from the get-go. It's not set up, and I like it for that. I like sometimes just to cut to the chase in a superhero movie. I don't need a whole lifetime of angst and rejection.
Yeah, I think, with this one in particular, Superman appears. I think the first time we see him in costume, he's coming out of a photo booth
Yes.
That because we know that he changes from Clark Kent to Superman in photo booths or phone boxes or revolving doors or things like that, and saves a man from drowning in his own car. Believe me, if you haven't seen this film, you need to. It makes sense.
Yeah, and in a city as well. He's not near a lake or a river. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and he also hands a photo to himself because obviously the little toddler boy that plays young Clark Kent lifting the Kent family truck at the beginning of Superman the movie is the little boy that gets handed the photos in the passport booth, which I love that. And he's also in Man of Steel playing a soldier as well. So Superman films are quite good at that, just bringing back people and popping them back in, whether you notice or not.
Yeah.
But yeah, the slapstick to me, though, nothing screams out what's possibly a problem with Superman 3. If you want to view Superman 3 as having any problems, and I don't know how people would ever do that, but... I think nothing sums it up more than it says directed by Richard Lester as someone gets a sort of custard pie in the face.
Yeah.
And I think perhaps I'm definitely Team Donner when it comes to Superman.
Yes.
The Saul kind era of Krypton. And actually I think what's great about Superman 3 is it holds more DNA of Richard Donner than not. Like, the grimy, loud employment bureau cues and sort of that constant noise of tapping and keyboards. I think that's actually a lot more Richard Donner than Richard Lester. So I think the reason Superman 3 works is it's still got that Richard Donner DNA and also that Tom Mankiewicz DNA, that slightly acidic, barbed wit. Like, get a hold of yourself, Vera. No one else ever will. That's a real Mankiewicz kind of hangover type line.
I mean, one thing I did write, and I do wonder if Mankiewicz wrote this one, was a little bit further down the line when they're going to the Grand Canyon and Gus Gorman Pryor insists on taking a donkey.
Yes.
As he says, I don't believe a man can fly.
Yes.
Riffing on the first film's tagline, and you used to wonder someone sat there and patted themselves on the back very proudly for that one.
Well, I can't remember. I was going to check Tom Mankiewicz's biography, which I've got on the shelf here, or autobiography. But his fingerprints on a lot of films he doesn't always get credited for, like Batman '89. I think he had a sweep through on Gremlins as well. And there's a few other films. I mean, he worked on more Bond films than he ever got credited for as well. And I do wonder, maybe he had a little check on the. Although to be fair, he wouldn't. He was Team Donner as well, so I doubt he would have come back and done that particular favour. I mean,
this film bringing together a lot of elements from the previous films, but clearly, with that whole opening scene, I won't go into it too much, but you've got things with penguins on fire and probably the anti-advert for guide dogs and things, but it's everything around it. And I watched, researching this, the making of documentary that was on the Blu-ray.
Oh, I love that one. Is that Is that the one from the day, back in the day?
Yes, where was it Al Matthews, I think, narrated that one.
Yeah.
They're sort of filming this whole scene in was it Vancouver?
Calgary.
Yeah.
Calgary, yeah.
And the scene with a bank robbery, which and one point that he made in this is all these people are standing around watching what looks like a bank robbery, not knowing how integral it is to the plot, which is very, very minimal.
Yeah.
All it does is basically sets up the guy in the car getting shot, getting drowned nearly, and things like that. There's a whole sort of raft of things that they're just tiny cogs in that whole element, and all you can see is as Clark Kent wanders off in his very tasteful beige suit, people staring out of a window, and that's where Gus Gorman is learning his computers.
Yes. Yeah.
By pressing, I think, pretty much print, he confuses the whole teacher.
Okay, I slightly overlooked that one. So you're saying that chaos almost instigates the film?
Oh, well, that seems to be happening while people are looking out of the window at the computer school that he's at.
Yeah, it's brilliantly choreographed, though. I mean, fair play. It does have a pace and rhythm, but Richard Lester did a lot of Beatles movies, and it does have that slight sort of bizarre swinging 60s. Let's do anything on the streets vibe because we can, and it's the swinging 60s, but it's not swinging 60s. It's 1983 or 1982, and we're doubling up sort of Metropolis, New York, in Calgary to sort of save a few bucks. Yeah, it's a kind of strange opener, and when you look back, it's the first opener of Superman movie. It's not in space, and I remember even as a kid thinking it's all a little bit local. It's it's a little bit high street more than it should have been, but they're not as British high street as Superman 4, but that that's when the Krypton green stuff does hit the Lex Luthor fan.
I mean, I noticed, and again, this is probably from watching on ITV as a kid, and I know this is more of a thing now because they brought out recently an extended version of the original Superman film, which I remember bits of from watching on TV. But I did see a version of this where the credits were in space. They had the whole a different theme, because this one opens with, obviously it's not John Williams involved at all, but it's a very jaunty opening theme, that just plays along with Pamela Stevenson walking through as men stop and get custard pied in the face.
Yeah, I mean, it's very 40s if you think about it. She's sort of slightly Betty booping her way down the street, and I always remember seeing Pamela Stevenson on a chat show talking English, and that really confused me, or didn't have that squeaky voice, rather, because she was never English. Yeah, and there's all those British TV faces as well that confused me, like people from the Benny Hill, like Bob Todd, who was one of Benny Hill's sort of stooges. He was in it, and Graham Stark and Henry Wolfe. There's all these pals of Richard Lester sort of starting the film, but it's fine. It's fine. I think it's that moment of where Clark Kent's sort of extinguishing fiery penguins. I remember thinking, this isn't quite sort of Lois Lane in a helicopter, not really.
No, but as you say, it's a bit more high street to Donna's Metropolis.
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
no less enjoyable.
Yeah, and also because I think Superman 3, I say in the book, it's because the first two Superman movies have that beautiful sense of Americana, whether it's sort of the mythology of Smallville and those beautiful cornfields, flipped with the urban modernity of Metropolis, get a real sort of Studio 54 late 70s Metropolis. But that slightly goes out the Daily Planet window here, and it becomes a sort of film, an allegory to consumerism, or a metaphor for consumerism in a computer age. So it's all about what you're buying, what you earn, what's in your bank. There's a lot. It's a real 80s Superman film as well.
The first scenes in the Daily Planet, it's all about drawing a competition to increase circulation for the planet itself.
Yes.
And the various sort of bits and bobs there. Talking about sort of articles, and this is almost like where they touched upon in Superman 2, where they're talking about the sort of weekend supplement, the whole thing, reason why Lois and Clark went to Niagara Falls.
That's right, yeah.
And this one's about sort of Superman off doing his high school reunion, and Lois, obviously completely written out of the film, going to Bermuda, and turns out undercovering huge levels of corruption while in a tiny bikini. Yeah,
and it's that sort of sidelining of Margot Kidder. There's rumours that she fell out with the producers, they fell out with her, then they've all said no, that wasn't the case. Who knows? And maybe a third spin of that will they won't they Lois Clark thing may not have worked a third time. But yeah, one thing, did you notice there's a weird time jump? Because in Superman the movie, his school childhood is it's really framed by 50s Americana, and it's rock around the clock, and it's 50s football girls and boys and their Studebakers and all of that. And then 5 years later, third film, Superman 3, he's going back to his high school reunion, and I think it's the class of 65.
Yeah,
like, hang on, how many years did Clark stay in that remedial year? It's like they really eat that one out.
Yeah.
I may have read that wrong. But...
Well, no, I was trying to do some maths, because, I mean, obviously the first film was in 78, and then I'm sure at one point Jarrell said, when they're in the Fortress of Solitude, 12 of your years will have passed, or something.
We have reasoned out logical judgments. By the time we return to the confines of your galaxy, 12 of your years will have passed.
Okay,
so I suppose that would have been 66.
Right. Okay, all right, that gets around that one. Right, okay.
I think. But then it did seem, certainly from our perspective, the music that was being played in the car, that Clark raced home, and the dress of the day, it seemed of a slightly different era. I'd have imagined, it would have been difficult, I guess, trying to remove it from that contemporary world. But, if Superman Clark Kent was growing up in America in the mid-60s, I mean, even in Kansas, they'd have been pretty aware of, I know, Beatlemania or something like that.
Yeah, and Clark does that weird thing of instead of, I think they've missed a beat in Superman 3. We could have had him maybe visiting the grave of Jonathan Kent, but no, he's more obsessed with his sort of jaunty, over-the-shoulder, folded knitwear. Sort of Clark's really become a sort of Simon Le Bon 80s yuppie almost.
Catalogue model.
Yes, exactly.
You know, the big first set piece of the film is the chemical fire on the way. Clark and Jimmy are on the way to Smallville. It's weird that I suppose Clark needs to take a photographer with him, but they come across this fire, and Shane Rimmer is the local police officer. I guess he's been demoted again after his.
Yeah, I was about to say the Great Rimmer, but that's in all UK audiences balk at that one. Yeah. Shane Rimmer should be in every Superman film, every Bond film, every everything film. I love Shane Rimmer. Yeah, it's a great scene. As usual, it was always filmed in a lake outside Slough as well. I like the Sorkind sense of economy on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's probably been in more of these podcasts than anyone else. But
I met him a year or two
really?
ago. Yeah, and it was just like, and I heard the voice over my shoulder chatting to someone else, and I went, Shane Rimmer's right behind me, and all I could hear was "What's a curl?" and all those Bond sort of colonels he's played. And he had a great life as well, being the sort of Canadian token Yank. Happened to be in the right home county studio system at the right time.
I mean, it's strange he even popped up in mentioned in Morons from Outer Space, which is just completely random. But
I think he's in Batman. Begins.
Batman Begins, yeah. It's like the train controller or something. And
that's like a real. The casting people or the director really knew what they were doing when they just dropped him on.
Yeah, but this one, so Jimmy sneaks off to take photographs of the fire. Clark does a quick change in the back of a police car, which, you know, he did well because most police cars have the child locks on the back seats.
True.
And the chief of police, I mean, it's just one of these funny little jokes. Is it, you know, says, "Get this man a helmet." Turns around, sees Superman, forget the helmet.
Yeah. And that's that Jimmy Olsen thing of, I'm going to turn up and help document this for posterity, but I'm going to just break my ankle in really slightly childish, stupid ways. And no one ever sees his photos as well. Has anyone ever seen a Jimmy Olsen, Mark McClure era photo? I don't feel we have.
Other than, and I guess this is probably the only time, is the start of this film where he's got lots of pictures of Pamela Stephenson.
Okay,
and her cleavage.
Yeah, well, that's sort of... That becomes...
And even then, Perry Olsen picked holes in the one of Vera because he said it looked fuzzy.
Yeah, and then it gets a bit stalkery and weird, but although not as weird as like when Mark McClure turns up in Supergirl and he's clearly, you know, the character's clearly in his early 30s, but he's hanging out with sort of 16-year-old Lana Lang, or Lana, not Lana Lang, the sister of Lois Lane.
Was her name Lara? No, that was Supergirl.
I saw it recently as well. Miss Lane, we call her Miss Lane, yeah. But she's like revelling in her 16-year-oldness, and he's like, he's not 16 anymore.
Yeah, he's on some sort of register, isn't he?
Yeah, different from. Although they share a lot of connections, those, you know, Superman 3 and Supergirl. And what I think what I do like particularly about Superman 3 is it's not, as I said before, it's not setting it up. It's just having its laughs, and I sort of respect it a lot for that.
And I, touching on what you said earlier about how this film doesn't, you know, how a lot of films now they lead into another in a franchise or spin-offs and things like that. And this one was originally supposed to spin off into Supergirl, whereas the two, while Supergirl came out, I think the year after this, or maybe two.
Yeah, 1 year.
Yeah, they're not particularly linked. There's no, oh well, we'll see her in Supergirl. That was removed. I think that was I've read something in a IMDb, I think, suggesting that was actually going to happen, that they were going to feed this into Supergirl somehow, and then the two would become intertwined. But, you know, I watched Supergirl maybe a couple of years ago, and the only connection to that was again Jimmy Olsen in saying that Superman couldn't appear because he's on some sort of intergalactic peace mission or something.
Right. Weird. Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's right. I mean, he's on a photo or two in the girls' dormitory. I think there was a big plan to have Christopher Reeve in Supergirl, but I don't know, maybe he read the script or no. Possibly it would have jarred, because it's a bit like having Sean Connery turn up in, you know, Roger Moore's Roger Moore's first Bond film. It's like, why would you do that? Because it's not that story. It's not that beat anymore.
But even so, I mean, this, even the fire scene, for example, this, Jimmy has to be rescued. He's almost like the damsel in distress again. Like from the first one, we had to get picked up from the Hoover Dam. This one, he gets picked up out of the fire. And Superman's very clever way of, because again, just happens, the fire engines run out of water. There happens to be a lake nearby. And I wonder, who just coming up with the idea of freezing the top of a lake and lifting it? And I just wrote in here, I'm no scientist, but surely if you drop that much ice over a fire, it would just drop and probably crush a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's like, how did he sort of get the exact cut of the dimensions, the sort of blueprint map of the power plant? Yeah, I'll give him that, but it was a great moment, because I remember when the film was actually shown very early on ITV. It came out, I want to say September '85, which is barely 2 years after its UK release, and that was quite rare for UK TV at the time to be so quick. And I say in the book, actually, I remember we did games at school, and it was the first time we were introduced to football, and I hated it. And it was the first lesson of the day, and I remember thinking, just get through this. Superman 3 is on telly tonight. Just get through this. Just get through this. And every time I think of Superman 3, I also think of those getting through the day. And yeah, it was on early. It had a lot earlier release, but they always showed that clip of him freezing the lake and then picking it up. That was always their sort of trailer ad break go-to moment.
As an iconic-ish part, this is one of the things where it shows off early. Don't forget, he's got superpowers. He doesn't just fly. He does other things too.
Yeah, and also it does give him a reason, because it's linked to how he topples the supercomputer at the end. He sort of goes back and calls a favour and gets one of the vials of the chemicals. So there is a slight reason. It's not just a total drop in. But again, it's a good. I like it. I love when all those people go down the chimney chute. I always thought, I want to do that. Is that really possible? Can we do that?
Probably, but I can't imagine the inside of that smokestack is going to be particularly clean.
No,
especially in early 80s.
But Shane Rimmer will greet you at the end of it, so you've got to sort of work these things out.
I mean, I suppose over the course of the first 3 films, he went from naval officer to NASA engineer to local sheriff. I mean, he'd be lucky if he's cleaning toilets by Superman 4.
Well, he was just embarrassed for he just played embarrassed city dweller on the left. Yeah,
dedicated public servant.
No, a great guy.
One thing I skipped over was earlier on, because Gus Gorman's got a job at Websco, Ross Webster's company, and he's a low-level data processor. I guess these are in the days when not many people had computers, so you could just do any old nonsense on them and no one would think. Whereas you get now, the sort of people go into it and go, no, that's not what he did. But this is where he and his colleague, call him Clive Exposition, explain the whole scenario around the half-cent scheme, which, not just set up how he gets into Webster's pockets here, it also sets up a whole other film called Office Space. So.
Okay.
Have you seen that?
Right. No. Office Space?
Yeah, Office Space. It's Mike Judge, who did Beavis and Butthead, and he wrote this film. I think it was must have been late 90s, because Jennifer Aniston was in it. And the guy...
No, I don't know that one.
Yeah, the guy in that, he came up with a way... He didn't want to be made redundant, so he came up with his way of scamming his firm by using the Richard Pryor half-cent scheme.
This sounds familiar. Yeah, they did in Superman 3.
Oh, I should know this. No, I didn't know that. All I do know is it's first 2 Superman films. We have, if they rob a bank, it's with glass cutters and sort of striped burglar suits, and then suddenly we're just transferring funds, which is never going to make for good cinema. And you're right, they try and over-explain it. And when later on, when Richard Pryor and Gavin O'Hurley drunkenly sort of break in, and they've got their big sort of Dallas hats on, and it's all a bit weird, and got Giorgio Moroder's country and western music. It's okay, yes, what's going on here? But and also Gavin O'Hurley's repeating his character in Never Say Never Again, which is the same year as well, where he plays a sort of unwitting drunken military stooge who just gets used by the villain to get access to things. But yeah, it's they have to explain it a lot. But that's interesting that the whole template for that was used in another film. I like that.
Yeah, I can't remember how much money they made out of this, but I think Gus Gorman made $85,000. And then when leads up to when the old bookkeeper notices it and brings it to Ross Webster, and just the classic lie says,
"He'll keep on quietly taking the bread from our mouths. He'll keep a low profile, and he won't do a thing to call attention to himself. Unless, of course, he is a complete and utter moron."
as Richard Pryor turns up in a brand new red Ferrari.
Yeah. I mean, that's very Mankiewicz as well. That's slight sort of irony, and that Lex Luthor world. I'm presuming they planned on having Hackman back, and the script was pretty Luthered up. We just changed the name at the last instance. But I like Robert Vaughn in it. He's got this sort of Aspen louche, slight sort of camp money man that's, with his zip up anoraks. I like what he does in that one.
Yeah, no, it was good. I enjoyed that. And this is where we're introduced properly to his sister, who, the very fearsome, I say, when I was watching this as a young boy, I think her and, how shall I put it later, her alter ego were probably the scariest things in my life at that time.
Right. Seriously, thank you. I mentioned it in the book. I thought I was the only one. I've heard a couple of people say it, but yeah, later on when Annie Ross gets robotomized, I don't know why, because you look at it, it's really silly. It's stupidly done, but it just literally got under my skin, the idea of that. And I've still got a problem with like bits of metal being on my skin or holding a wire. No, I'm not joking. And contact lenses as well. I could tell she was wearing sort of robotic contact lenses, and that just creeped me out as well. I don't need glasses, fortunately, but contact lenses, I always just think of her and all of that and those sort of Superman villains. It's strange what sears onto your mind. And also, I bet you've got a fear of combine harvesters as well.
Well, I've got certainly a healthy respect for them after this. I mean, growing up in an estate in North London, I never came across too many.
Okay, well, I grew up in, I wouldn't say leafy Surrey, although we had some leaves, but there was barley fields, and they would leave the combine harvesters there overnight and come back in the morning. And I was just like, what if it just starts moving? What if I'm walking to school and no one will know for years because there's no one around. But yeah, sort of eating pate on a picnic blanket in a cornfield. Don't do it.
Yeah, you need to be careful in case you accidentally fall on a rock and
and
Superman won't be there.
yeah, and end up having a horrible bowl cut and being called Ricky, but that's maybe we'll get to that in a minute.
Yes, I did wonder, as a slight aside, I had to Google Annie Ross, who played Vera, and it turned out she had a really eclectic sort of CV and she was really known as a jazz singer, and I had no idea. Yeah,
she still is. I don't know if she's still with us. I have a feeling
I think she is. Yeah, I think I looked, saw yesterday anyway, she was 89 in the summer.
Yeah, no, she's definitely a big jazz cabaret sort of piano bar stalwart in America. Yeah, I mean, this was almost a detour for her, but good casting, clever casting.
Yeah, I mean, she was terrifying, and if that's what they were going for, it bloody worked.
She's also terrifying when she's just breaking everyone's balls, including her own, and sort of getting all. She's sort of out Faye Dunaway's the Soulkind mid-80s films with her sort of bitchiness, and she's seriously wearing the Soulkind suit in that film.
Yeah. And so we have the brief meeting between Gus and Ross Webster, and Webster's outlining his plot to take over the world's coffee crop by basically decimating Colombia.
Yeah, we're trying to have a green message? I don't know, because they do all that stuff with the Colombia, and that couple that have won the Daily Planet competition just forever keep turning up at various wind machine sets on the back lot of Pinewood.
Yeah, because I mean, skipping over that whole part, essentially it engineers Richard Pryor going to Smallville, getting Brad pissed, and then doing, I suppose, what people in the 80s thought computers would do. And you had things like cash machines spewing out notes to the sheriff from the second film, because again, they like to keep people involved.
Streetlights beating each other up. I just remembered the streetlights sort of arguing with each other, and
I always hope, because I mean, my eldest daughter, she's 3.5, and busy trying to sort of educate her about wait for the Green Man and everything. And there's always that little fraction in the back of my head going, but what if the Green Man gets up and beats up the Red Man?
Yeah, what if the Red Man's wearing a Green Man's outfit?
Yeah,
I'm like,
exactly.
hang on, these are important questions. What's Ross Webster's quietly going to destroy humanity, but just not yet?
Marginal gains.
Yeah.
At one point, I did mention we talked about this in the second one, I don't know how it came up, and a very, obviously looking back now, it's awful, but the man basically assaulting his wife with a grapefruit because he thinks she overspent at Bloomingdale's.
Is that the
looks
scene
horrible
where
now.
there's also that horrible age gap as well, or there's the height gap? There's that comedian with the moustache, I can see him now, and he's got this sort of beautiful blonde squeaky wife. Oh, it's Sandra Dickinson, of course it is. It's Peter Davison's then wife, who crops up in Supergirl. So they're
True.
again, still kind like to get their money's worth. It's like, can you just pop across the hedge and go onto the set of Supergirl and film a scene while you're here, thanks. Which is actually, I joke, but that is actually what they did, not for Superman 3 and Supergirl, but they would double up films. There's massive contractual changes in actors' law and contractual law in Hollywood. Okay. Because of what the Salkinds often tried to get away with, allegedly. Including signing up people for, that's a really long shoot, and then, this is actually 2 films, we're only paying you for 1. Yeah. Those little things like that they paved a way for, put it that way.
I mean, one thing that I know you talked about it briefly on from Taylors with Love episode you were on recently, where because a lot of this film was set filmed at Pinewood at around the same time that Octopussy was being filmed, and there was that photo that comes up quite often of Superman in the circus, Christopher Reeve on set in the circus at the end of Octopussy with Roger Moore in full clown gear. It's quite remarkable to see Superman and James Bond together, but I guess because the supercomputer set of this was filmed, was that on the 007 stage?
That was the 007 stage.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was, but also so was the Octopussy circus tent. So maybe there was perhaps an early crossover of productions, because all I do know from what people have said is there was very few big productions at Pinewood around those years. So Octopussy and Superman 3 to a degree had carte blanche on the set. Now there's not enough room to sort of swing a Millennium Falcon and an Aston Martin.
When I see that photo, it always makes those 2, Superman, James Bond, and I suppose Star Wars, were the sort of big 3 things in my life as a kid anyway, so seeing some crossover, I guess the closest we have now is a Daniel Craig cameo as a stormtrooper.
Yes, that's true. I think of others now. There's loads of crossovers, but and also those 3 that's good. Star Wars, Bond, and Superman. Those 3 films, they were really based and rooted in that home county's British studio system as well, whether it was Elstree or Pinewood, bits of Shepperton as well. And I don't know, they economically used what they had, so there's so much Britishness or Calgaryness in Superman 3, and Supergirl. The Supergirl sets as well were left at Pinewood for ages, and I think I saw recently that the road from that Midvale set in Supergirl that they built on the back lot just behind the Bond stage became the asphalt on the roads of Gotham in Batman, because they thought, just leave it here. We don't, then that partly helped the first Batman film get based at Pinewood, because they saw the Supergirl road and thought, well, we've already got a street here, so we just build a different set. And I love all that artifice and that. And I actually think there are some very great books. Gareth Owen's done Pinewood Story, and there's a few done in the 80s. But I feel there's a really good documentary series, or I want there to be, looking at those home county studios and their real big impacts that those Hollywood films brought, whether it was Bond, Superman, or Star Wars. Classic example is the sets of the sets of Cleopatra in the early 60s were abandoned at Pinewood because the temperatures were just too cold for the production to carry on. So then suddenly the Carry On team jump in and they have all these amazing sort of technicolored, expansive sets because they were just left behind. And if you're lucky enough to walk around Pinewood, you do see random things. I've seen some things recently which I'm not going to. They're actually not been in a film yet, although at Christmas they might be. And you're like, they've just left that there, and you do see sort of heads of things and Sphinx's feet that are actually just made of polystyrene. It does slightly have that Roger Rabbit studio feel to it, which is what it should have.
The magic of Hollywood.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, so in this we've had Columbia's all sorts. Superman's saved Columbia. We've had the whole scene where Gus Gorman explains it using a cape made out of a tablecloth and skis off the side of a building. They come up with a plan to basically synthesize kryptonite to kill Superman, as you do. But this was something that I guess also harked back to comics, because apparently was it a red kryptonite, I think it was, where there's an alternate version that does different things to Superman rather than just hurt him.
Oh, okay.
I don't know a huge amount, but it looks green, and when they give it to Superman, he doesn't seem... I mean, obviously they're expecting him to pass out and die, but you'd think after the first film, Superman would look at what is clearly kryptonite and go, no thanks.
And there's that odd moment of where there's suddenly, it's like a press conference panel with Clark Kent's new girlfriend and her son, and they're all sort of on the same panel. I know it's the boy's birthday, but I'm like, why is he sort of sat there being... And then you get that shot of Vera, Annie Ross, turning up in her sort of butch fatigues, and it's sort of... It does feel like another film. It feels like Stir Crazy or something at that point, seeing Gus Gorman in his army fatigues.
I wonder if he did some sort of stand-up gig while he was there, although there are probably too many kids in the crowd as well.
Oh, God, could you imagine? He's just going to have some various narcotics and address the crowds. Yeah. Oh, God, could you imagine? Yeah. Although he does a great job. I do like Richard Pryor. And I once met his daughter, or one of his daughters, Rain Pryor, who's a great keeper of her father's legacy, but she's got a lot of interesting tales to tell herself. And she was looking at me, and her eyes are her dad's eyes, obviously, but she's got the dad's eyes, and I'm like, oh my God, Richard Pryor's eyes are looking at me right now. And it was a strange moment, and all I could think of was Superman 3. You know, I've been to the Grand Canyon, and my partner is a science teacher and was marveling at the geology and the expanse of the Grand Canyon, and I'm just seriously, all I'm thinking of is Richard Pryor on the back of a donkey and those cool, they're still quite cool, those sort of balloons that they ascend down on. That's all that was in my head.
Yeah, we went there on a honeymoon, and you kind of think like, it's not quite the same. A helicopter, but I want a little balloon and a donkey. How'd you get down to the bottom?
Yeah, is that a thing? No, I mean, you see jetpacks and they come up in other films, but you've never quite seen that sort of balloon seat thing. Probably because they were just a set prop designed at Pinewood.
So after Superman's been given the kryptonite-ish, goes back to Lana's house and starts getting a bit woozy. And this is the scene that I kind of look back and think, Jesus, if this were an 18 film, this would have got really weird. She gets a phone call telling her about the truck hanging off the bridge, and when he says no rush, and gets very familiar. Oh yes,
he does get a bit sort of 80s sitcom, a bit. Well, it's more than just a little horny. You're right. Yeah. And then he obviously does all the peanut flicking in the bar a bit later.
But which is really like sort of hitting on the single mother, sort of saying, "Oh, it's not often you get a good-looking girl like you all alone." Like,
and already the suit's starting to go grey, and he must be going ill because they've added makeup under his eyes. He's getting a bit tired because that's sort of what passed as villainy in the 80s, just looking a bit tired.
And a tiny bit of stubble.
Yeah, but Reeve does great with that, and I'm sure, I don't want to jump the Webster gun here just yet, but later on, that whole scrap heap sequence, and when he's in the bar as well, Reeve never gets held up as one of the world's greatest actors. Maybe, sadly, we didn't get to see him stretch his wings a bit, or his cape even, but he's really good. It's possibly his best performance in Superman 3 as well. I'm just sort of, because he's doing more with the character, because something that emerges in Superman 3 is also Christopher Reeve's own passion and dedication to the role, something he tried to take forward in Superman 4 and potential Superman 5, where he wanted more ownership and maybe to direct and really come up with the stories and explore the character. But sadly, as he wanted to push forward, the budgets went backwards to £4.90 and sort of 1930s film technology.
I mean, I guess this is the thing where, he became more confident as Superman, and, there were stories about this, they were trying to recast him because he didn't want to do it initially. And you kind of think, like, for a generation of people growing up, he is Superman. and to some extent probably still is to a lot of people. And yet, as you say, it just kind of fell at the wrong time, because as thing, because in this film he's essentially playing 3 parts, not just 2. Because I mean, because this is where sort of bad Superman straightens the Tower of Pisa, pisses off Ron Jeremy, blows out the Olympic torch, and it's just things like that where, that looks like if you're Superman and you're playing this sort of real American hero type person, you can suddenly have a bit of fun and get pissed in the middle of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Reeves' skills playing Clark Kent, I mean, any Superman film for me, it's how that actor plays Clark Kent is whether it gets sold to me as a Superman fan. And I think Cavill just about got there, although he didn't seem to be allowed to be Daily Planet Clark Kent that much. But how it was a really hard role, that Clark Kent role, and he famously brought that slight sort of Cary Grant bringing up baby 30s sense of slapstick and comedy and leading man sort of romance-ness. And I think there's a lot of that in Superman 3, and I like his Clark in that film. He also, I'm going to go there, he's a really hot Clark Kent in Superman 3, and maybe it's the jumper, which I really wanted. I still want one of those Smallville jumpers, but I'll jauntily put it across my shoulders and tie it in a sort of 80s Simon Le Bon way.
Yeah, because I mean, even when he's Superman, bad Superman, and he's got the stubble and the sort of burgundy cape and everything like that, you can see why there was a push a few years ago, I think, for John Hamm to play if they did a sort of rehash. He looked very Don Draper. The hair was still slick, but he looked like the drink during the day, and that sort of he looked like he'd probably slap you then kiss you, or vice versa.
And I think it's a shame Reeve left us so soon, because he stayed on for a bit, but that injury in 95, 96 was so horrific. I was about 20 then, but I remember thinking that was a real blow to my childhood, hearing Superman's is no longer able to be physically super anymore. But had that not happened, I do wonder if we may have had, and I'm serious here, sort of 95, 96, we may have had Superman 5, and not in a tacky, not that Kevin Singer would have done it tackily, but I know that there was that Nicolas Cage, that whole project and process had to be looked at and go through. But I just wonder if we may have had an older, Christopher Reeve would have come back, and it could have been Superman Returns. I often look at that film and wonder, because it's got so much Christopher Reeve DNA in it, the first Bryan Singer movie. I just wonder, we could have had more of him. But I suppose it's what we do have, 3.5 films maybe. Is a good legacy.
Yeah, and perhaps one many people's high point of this film, and certainly mine, and I think the part that probably stands out the best is the fight between Superman and Clark Kent, which just to say sounds odd, but when you see it seems to make sense. And the more you kind of think about it, and I know that initially this film was actually meant to be called Superman versus Superman, and yet, other than a couple of tiny bits where it looks a bit awkward how they've made it, I mean, it's shot particularly well. They've kind of worked with what they've got really well, and this is by far my favourite part of the film, and it's essentially 2 superheroes going at it in a junkyard. Yeah,
it's a great sequence. It's beautifully realised, and it was I think they recreated or built that whole junkyard at Pinewood, so then they had proper control. It wasn't like they had it for a day or two. They really structured that, because it was a big stunt and effects scene, particularly the stunts. You're not just got Christopher Reeve playing 2 Supermans, you've got his stunt double playing into the mix as well, and there's a lot of off the shoulder work, and that great moment where he just finally rips open the white shirt and he's back. It's a great beat, and I think that's as important to the Christopher Reeve Superman movies as catching that helicopter in '78.
And did you notice there was a Blade Runner poster in the background?
No.
Of the so you could tell obviously when they'd made it. When the part where Clark Kent's throwing the tyres at Superman,
right,
there's a very large Blade Runner poster just behind him.
Nice. I remember there was a Psycho 2 reference in Supergirl when she's doing her I can fly, and she's flying across all the cityscapes at night. There's a drive-in movie theatre playing Psycho 2.
Oh, really?
Naturally, yeah.
Of course. I mean, those films go together very well. But,
yeah, of course.
But yeah, I mean, that part was brilliant. And, the fact that when, as you say, when Clark opens his shirt, it is the proper Superman costume. It's red and blue, not burgundy and whatever. And his first act is to fly back to the tanker that he put a big hole in and blow all the oil back in.
Because you can do that with oil. Yeah, I love that.
Yes.
Or you just get the editors to crank it back and just reverse the film. And
use the heat ray that I wouldn't put near oil. And I wonder what he did to all the animals and fish that he almost certainly murdered.
And did you notice in Aquaman, they kind of...
I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen Aquaman?
No,
that's fine. You may have dodged a decent bullet there. I call it Splash Gordon. It's when it's camp and ridiculous, it's brilliant. But it's over earnest, like so many blooming superhero movies are. It just doesn't
take the camp
dream. Yeah, but they have this whole sequence. I think it's set in Italy or sort of on the Med Coast, and some bad guys are letting rip, and tourists are in a medieval old cliffside town, and old sculptures are collapsing, and there's children, and it's really, you can see there's some Superman 3 DNA in Aquaman. I think I will defend that. Okay. That sort of sense of Pisa and Italy, and needing to rescue children, in Italian towns. Yeah, I will stand by Superman 3 little bits of it in Aquaman.
You very much sold that to me.
You don't need to see Aquaman because it will be 4.5 days out of your life. Although see it for the weird Nicole Kidman de-aging thing they do. They've
de-aged her as well.
Yeah, and she's only her age in one scene. So I'm like, why don't you just get a younger actress and then make her look older for one scene rather than have this de-aging Nicole Kidman. Also the Kiwi actor that she plays opposite, who was in Attack of the Clones. I don't want to say his name because I'll get it wrong, but he's it.
Oh, yeah. Was he the bloke who played Django Fett?
Yeah, that's him, and he's the father, and she's the mother of Aquaman. Anyway, I've gone off on a Nordic tangent there.
It's all linked. It's DC somewhere. So.
It is DC, yeah, and that's what I loved about the Joker. Sorry to put a tangent on a tangent, but I loved to see how Joker with Joaquin Phoenix, they just reclaimed the cinema and superhero in one film. They took it back from Marvel. I know Marvel have become this multi-trillion-pound behemoth of franchise cinema, and fair play to them. I'm not its biggest fan, but fair play to them. But I loved how Joker just reclaimed that crown, or a big chunk of it. Because yes, Batman 89, Superman 78, Superman 83. They were all DC. Marvel couldn't get a look in. So I was really glad that Joker slightly puffed up the DC feathers and said we're a thing too.
Are you saying that there's scope somewhere for a Luther film or something like that?
I just suddenly saw some bath time film about a Luther, like a Pixar film. No, do you know what? If you cast it right, and if it's written right, and it's got the right director and the right mind to sort of oversee it, then yes, why not? I don't need it to perhaps be in this sort of Gotham TV Titan era. I don't think it needs to work in that, but yes, why not? But casting Lex Luthor is notoriously hard. They lucked out with Hackman, and it's never, every time since, for me anyway, it's always been, he's not Gene Hackman. He's not Hackman. And then when we got Jesse Eisenberg, I just find him he's doing that same thing he did in Social Network. He's pouring scorn on the audience. He's not just pouring scorn on Metropolis, he's pouring scorn on us, and I kind of didn't like it for that. But give me a Luther film. Or no, let's do a Vera film. A Vera and Ross Webster, perhaps just doing a late 60s road trip where just end up at Woodstock and he sees a computer manual and gets an idea. Maybe. And
as long as that they go to a festival and he has to reuse the same pair of socks that he so famously scorned on earlier.
Yes, absolutely.
Right, so this is the sort of main battle part, because Gus Gorman has come up with this supercomputer that can defend itself and everything else. And I mean, in 2019, we're still struggling with those, with all the antivirus crap on my laptop. But this one they're in there. They've got this, and this is the part you were talking about earlier. It's a computer with flashing lights, but it's got missiles and rockets.
It's not just got rockets; it's got Atari rockets.
Oh yes.
It's not. I love how they actually. Atari actually did design all the animation, the computer animation. Maybe they did because no one else could do it at that time. But I love all that gameplay. I know it's ridiculous, but we won't just fire a rocket at Superman. We're going to show it in a slightly pixely. I'm not a computer game kid, but yeah, I like it for that.
I'd be interested to see, because I read somewhere that apparently it looked too lifelike, so they had to make it look more cartoony. But I mean, I wonder what a 1983 lifelike computer game would look like.
Well, there's a real obsession with computers in 80s movie. I mean, 83 particularly, and it was the era, of course. But War Games, Never Say Never Again, has the same sort of Bond. Bond and Superman used to fight their villains physically. Now we're going to sit down and play we're going to play a game of Pong in a great ballroom. Never Say Never Again does that as well. And it's hard. Computers and computer gameplay just doesn't translate to cinema. I remember that film The Net in 95 with Jeremy Northam and Sandra Bullock, and it was just like, oh God, just kidnap her, kill her, just get it over with, just wipe out her hard drive or something. There's probably great exceptions to the rules, but I'm struggling to think. Yeah, Superman 3 definitely hit that. How do we make computers and transferring funds cinematically interesting?
Yeah,
I know we'll make it look physical by having streetlights beat each other up. That's how we get the audience to work it out.
Or we'll have a computer that decides that the only way to beat Superman is to trap him in a balloon, and then somehow work out kryptonite and shoot it to him in the form of a green light.
Yeah, or trap him in this sort of condom we found down the canal. It's like, what is that?
That's dirty looking.
But that played to one of my fears as well, because that, I think we all have a fear of suffocation. I'm sure we do. But that whole idea of plastic, because we always told as kids, don't put that plastic bag on your head, you'll die. And then you suddenly see Superman, he's sort of surrounded in condom cling wrap, and then it just disappears, doesn't it? He just sort of. It pings away, drops to the ground.
And bear in mind, he can breathe in space. I don't know why he can't not that he'd want to stay in the balloon, but still, it's still weird why that would be of such difficulty other than a minor inconvenience.
But it's a good computer though, because it has that. They sort of try and frame it as like the xenomorph in Alien, where it's got acid for blood and in its system, and it's just a little bit. The internal mechanisms are a bit of a mystery, and I think it works. In terms of the physical menace at the end, it's just getting us to be worrying too much during is a different thing.
And I guess it kind of misjudged how things go, because in that way a supercomputer means it's bigger, whereas nowadays things must be smaller and fit into your pocket or onto a phone. Probably be an app now. But... Yeah,
I can see. I mean, Ross. I don't know why they've not brought Ross Webster back. I presume he wasn't particularly comic book canon and was more of a sort of plucked from a recent notion, but I like Ross Webster, and yes, he could come back and have an app. There could be some bank transfer app. He's basically in charge of PayPal. That's what it should be.
Yeah, they get the guy to Facebook to do him or something like that.
Absolutely.
So Gus gets an attack of conscience, and seeing Superman struggling, he takes the screw out of the computer. Swallows it, which made me think that you can swallow a screw. And then takes an axe to the computer as well, which that seems to work. And then the computer shoots him at a wall.
Not before that biting the thumb thing that Richard Pryor does as well. It's like it all goes a bit like a Tom and Jerry cartoon. Yeah. Which is, again, that's Richard Lester's sense of physical slapstick.
Two middle-aged men going at it who aren't exactly sort of titans of bodybuilding, arguing over a little screw. Well,
Napoleon Solo and Kal-El's been reduced to this.
Yes, but as Webster and Lorelei escape from the computer, this is the that bit.
the bit where she just gets robotomized. I don't know if that's a word, but I feel it should be. And she gets pulled back in, and it's the wires as well. It's like when you see those guys. It feels really old-fashioned, but you still see those little phone boxes that the BT engineers are fixing in the street, and it's just a box of wires. I don't know how they know what they're doing, but I always look at them and go, oh, it's like, I don't know what, it's like wires. They become veins, and it's ugh. Yeah, I know, and the silver Even though it looked like it's silver paint, it wasn't. It was, and it's the little patches of metal and I think it's because she's a bitch of a character beforehand, as well, and they just literally sort of as the silver platter that they cover her in silver. And then she can shoot stuff from her fingers and glare at her brother and sort of make him go all weird. And there's a sort of Bride of Frankenstein cinematic moment with her hair's going a bit arched.
That wig.
And she's played as a butch lesbian as well. They keep it subtle. They don't need to go there. But she's played as this spinster sister who's got a little bit of life bitterness about her, and I think Annie Ross pitches that really well.
And that sort of tension between her and Pamela Stephenson as the very intelligent woman. And of course, she's now Dr. Pamela Stephenson in real life, but who pretends to be ditzy, and that sort of beef that goes on throughout the film. Kind of,
it's weird though. It's odd that I get why she's doing it. It wasn't actually till adulthood because I thought, when I saw the film, I just assumed she was like this sort of dumb Tinkerbell blonde. And the joy is she's not. She's just playing that. But I'm not always so sure the film gets that over so well. But I love when she's fighting with, I don't know, Vera or Anne Widdecombe's, Anne Widdecombe Webster, and they have that. And they both know what's going on as well. They're both more intelligent and ahead of Robert Vaughn in the film. I like that as well. They're both using him like a puppet. He doesn't know. He doesn't need to know. He's a sort of nearly Trump-esque idiot that doesn't understand how strong women tick.
I suppose to say he's like Trump is quite accurate, because all he's initially interested in is exploiting things for money, whether it's the price of coffee or oil. It is all about making money. And I'm sure if he had a Twitter account, it would be full of random shit as well.
Oh my god, I'm seeing a fake Ross Webster.
It probably is.
Account. Let Ross Webster for the 46th president. We can do this. We can do this.
President Webster has a nice ring to it as well.
God, or actually President Luther. I'm sure the comic books and various novels have gone there and done that, but that could be an angle.
One thing I did notice, because Superman, as you said, he's gone back to the chemical plant, got one of those cans of acid. The computer does its it's just a can of acid, he's fine. Which is essentially, and I always thought it was just tomato ketchup squirting on the walls. The computer collapses because this acid somehow melts everything, and we do see Vera falling into the hole, but she's just Vera again. Her hair is back to normal, she's not silver or covered in anything. It's almost like the computer falls apart, so everything just drops off her and she reverts back to normal. It's
it's like they've pressed the factory default button on her system and she's gone back. You think they could have had her just like with half her face, almost like Phantom of the Opera, or just one bit of metal still stuck to her face, just that would have she's still got a bit of it in her system.
She sort of comes round and she's like sort of Bruce Banner in The Incredible Hulk the next morning, waking up in a puddle somewhere.
And they have that weird ball thing as well, where they get sort of pushed up against the polystyrene cliff face and held up by a ball. And I think that documentary, because Sorkinds did good behind-the-scenes documentaries. I slightly take the rise out of them, but they produced great pieces of pop culture. And one of the things they were savvy to was selling their product. They were often at Cannes with various hoardings and billboards, but those behind-the-scenes documentaries were really good. And I do remember that Superman 3 one, because they quite go into a lot of depth about that supercomputer cave set, if I remember rightly.
A lot of hydraulics, like the thing with the ball, that Pamela Stevens was actually attached to a hydraulic sort of arm that dragged her back. And I mean, that's the thing I always remember when, because I'm not sure whether I had them on video or something, but I remember seeing these ones when I was a kid and kind of thinking, why doesn't every film have this? But then in my head they did, and they were often on a Saturday morning, and it'd be when my mum wants to go shopping, like we're going to Tesco, and I'd be like 9 or 10, so that's slightly, I was an only child as well, so I would never be allowed just to stay at home and watch these things. So I'd record them. I wouldn't be that stupid. I would record them. And they did one for Supergirl, Krull, another 83 behemoth of cinema. And Santa Claus the movie did one as well. And there's, in fact, I'm going to put my Superman geek sticker on my sleeve here and own up to this. So I got married at Pinewood Studios. Okay, nice.
And we had various tables to different movies that were shot in and around the room we were in, not just on the lot, but the room we were in. And we were doing family photos, and the photographer found a little beautiful tree, and all the family. I'm like, right, and I said to him, can we go down this bit? And there's a beautiful hedged pathway, Pinewood, at the back of the mansion there. And in one of those Superman making of, Christopher Reeve walks towards the camera going, "Hi, I'm Christopher Reeve. You'll believe a man can fly, and we'll show you how." And we got our photo, my family, or my side of the family, we got our photo in that very same walkway. And in my head was Christopher Reeve on that making of documentary walking towards us. Photographer lost his nut because the lighting wasn't right. And he was, "Do we have to do it here?" And I'm like,
yes.
Yeah. Yes, we do. Yeah, we do. Because this is like the Superman Christopher Reeve. And that's from a making of. That's not even from the film. It has been used in countless films, that particular walkway. But yeah, that's what films like Superman 3 do to us 80s kids. We end up projecting them onto the rest of our lives, and I've got no problem with that.
Yeah, I mean, again, going back to my honeymoon, we went to New York as part of our trip, and we walked past the building that they did the exterior of the Daily Planet, and that it was just little things like that. And my wife said, "Why are we doing this?" I said, "I just want a photo."
I did that. Yeah. We went on our 30th birthday, and I remember we just got a new digital camera. We weren't quite used to how much you had to charge it. And we got there, I went to take one photo, and the camera died.
Oh, no.
My husband said, "Well, we'll come back tomorrow." I'm like, no. We are going back to the hotel. We're going to sit and have a coffee for 2 hours. We're going to charge up that battery, and then we're getting a cab back to the Daily Planet.
Yes.
And he looked at me like, why so important? It's Superman. Did you go inside as well? Because you can go inside-ish. You have to look like you know what you're doing. Because the inside, they also used in Superman 1 particularly, which is this beautiful Art Deco 30s globe.
The big globe, yeah.
The big globe, and it's still there. And I got multiple photos of myself sort of perched there. And the movies do that. And New York's such a great metropolis city even now.
I was thinking, like, one thing I when we didn't mention that when Lorelei was on top of the Statue of Liberty, sort of being the damsel, the Statue of Liberty features in all four films, all four Reeve films, quite prominently. I mean, this one a little bit. Obviously, in Superman 4, it becomes a character in itself of sorts, a bit like Ghostbusters 2.
Ghostbusters 2, yeah.
Yeah, but again, at least it was nice to feature the Statue of Liberty in there as well, just to let you know that, despite the fact that it was actually Calgary and all that, it was still the Statue of Liberty there. And
she was on a 4-film contract. She had to do it. And in fact, I bet she turns up as well in Santa Claus the movie, which I will put money uses sort of offcuts and unused flying at night scenes.
I'm sure he goes past it in his sleigh with a reindeer.
Yeah, that certainly does that, but the Twin Towers as well. I always end up watching Santa Claus the movie one Christmas morning on ITV 10 or whatever, where it's always on.
After Hot Fuzz.
And it is actually a Superman movie.
It is, isn't it?
Santa Claus the movie.
It's all the same sound effects and
the same plot, the same sort of fish out of water. City presented as menace, big billionaire, ruthless man in mansion, not treating everyone around him horribly.
John Lithgow.
John Lithgow would make a great Lex Luthor. Possibly moments past now, but when I went to New York, we said we must go and do a show, and we thought, no, we've missed. There's no way. We didn't book it. We're not going to get anything for tonight. But we got tickets to see Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, which was a musical version of the film, and it was brilliant. It was so good. But John Lithgow was playing the Michael Caine part.
Oh, really?
And we just saw a brilliant show. Wasn't that expensive, and we walked out, and I suddenly realised we're at the stage door. And as we leave the theatre, John Lithgow walks out, and all I can think of is BZ, and he has that hi. Fuck real. I think it should be Pew, so you would. I love it. I said to someone the other day, God, this is what Superman movies do to. Someone said, "What colour is this?" And I went, "Puce." Yeah. And everyone said, "I don't know what puce is. How do you even know what colour that is?" And I went, "Santa Claus the movie. It's the lollipops." So, obviously, yeah, obs. Anyway, we've tangented more than a Superman 4 deleted scene here.
Because I think all we had left was when Superman saves Gus, they fly to Batsy Power Station, meet Larry Lamb. Superman steals a lump of coal that just happens to have a very perfectly presented diamond within. Acts as a referee for Gus trying to get a job. Yeah, the 9-10 mile walk to a bus, which, to be honest, in Battersea sometimes is probably about right.
Just mentioning Larry Lamb,
Yes.
he was in Superman movie as well.
Yeah, worked in the Planet, didn't he?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he was a friend of Christopher Reeves. They got to
Oh,
know each
really?
other a little
Okay.
bit. Because I worked with him on something a while back, and yeah, he had everyone that's ever worked with Christopher Reeve had really good remembrances about him, saying there was something. It wasn't just because he was a movie star and he was good looking and brilliantly built and with those beautiful blue eyes. There was some sort of. I met a taxi driver and he said there was something almost godlike about him. That he had a sort of a quiet patience. There's a sort of benevolence to him that you didn't always get from Hollywood stars.
Yeah.
And Larry Lamb sort of alluded to the same.
And it's nice, just something like that, again, sort of taking you from one world to another. You're going to Battersea and Larry Lamb just happens to be there, and of course he's, still very famous and popular today.
Yes, yeah.
And then, so Clark's got the diamond, he goes to Lana's Travelodge, because I guess she's expecting Superman to take her out for dinner. Clark offers to take her out as well, but now I've wondered, does that leave Ricky on his own in the hotel? Where's the babysitter?
Yeah, well, I'd leave him. I'd just put him back in the cornfield and hope the combine harvester gets him. Really annoying, and I'm sure they dub his voice as well with a more annoying child.
Surely it's his dad's turn to have him this weekend. Maybe he dresses as Superman and climbs up the Houses of Parliament.
Well, that's a good point. Who's dad? It's not Brad.
No, it's...
I remember thinking, is it, though?
It was the king of the prom who didn't pop up. I think they said his name was Donald.
Okay.
And then because they were the king and queen of the prom. And then, because Brad wasn't the king, but I think he was trying to get the first dance off her or something like that, he said. But
it would have made more sense if Brad was the dad.
Yeah.
It would have also tied to Superman the movie a bit more as well. And Superman 3, because he is a bit superfluous, like that Never Say Never Again, where he's just there to let someone bad get access to a computer and then do more bad things.
Yeah. I mean, at least in Death Wish 3, which is famously filmed in Brixton, he was the leader of the gang.
God, what is it with South London and that era of sort of Battersea? I blame John Wayne and Brannigan. It was on Long Good Friday as well.
Yeah, it was cheap. But so I'm not sure how, because I guess they must be in Metropolis at this point. Brad turns up, looking very dishevelled. So I don't know how did he know that Lana was staying in that room. But he gets chucked out very quickly.
She probably put it on Facebook, and it happens. That's a good point. He does. Yeah, he just crops up.
I suppose he must have a tap into one of those apps that tell you where all the single mothers are.
Yeah. I'm not even. No, move on.
No, they're very good apps.
I think Superman's already used it. It's like there's people dying. No, let's just sit on the sofa and make out in a sort of Happy Days, Back to the Future way.
Yeah, that was vulnerable.
Yeah.
And then we go to the planet. Lois is back looking very tanned. Lana turns up and we get what almost should have been a cat fight, where Lois is very jealous of the diamond ring.
Hi, Lana.
Hi, Clark.
Oh, Lana. Lois, say hello to Lana Lang, Smallville's newest gift to Metropolis.
Oh, I'm glad to meet you, Miss Lane. I like your writing a lot.
Thank you. I like your sparkler a lot.
Oh, me too. I couldn't believe it when Clark gave it to me.
Clark gave it to you?
And then there's a new bingo machine, which is obviously a computer and goes horribly wrong. And Superman fixes the Tower of Pisa, putting our Ron Jeremy friend probably out of a few lira again.
Yeah, and his green screen. I love all this. It's like, did anyone ever leave Pinewood on this film? It's like everyone's green screened.
Yeah.
It was Calgary or Pinewood.
And yet it still looked a million times better than Superman 4.
I know. And that's sort of... Also, I mean, we're not here to pick apart Superman 4 because it's...
Oh, no.
It is what it is.
I love that film.
It's got good intentions. I remember walking out of it going, why was a Superman film 87 minutes? But to be fair, Superman 3 does this, but it just drops Lana Lang. It gets rid of her. And I get that they were shaking up a bit in a sort of Halloween 3 type way. We're just going to we're just going to put a few of the elements on the bench for this film. But there's no Lana Lang, there's no Ricky, probably all for good reasons. Do you imagine Richard Pryor turning up in Superman 4?
Richard Pryor should not be allowed in a film that doesn't have Gene Wilder in it.
No, you're right. Yeah. Oh, no, he did do a few. Blue Collar's a great film, which doesn't have Gene Wilder in. But yeah. No, you're very right on that.
But I mean, ultimately, I mean, I'd say of the four, I don't know. I mean, obviously the first two sit in their own place in the pantheon of my all-time favourites, and yet 3 and 4 are probably up in the top 10 of the films I've seen the most, and still will happily watch again.
Yeah, it's a bit like I don't know if you're that generation or you're that kind of 80s kid where you've got A New Hope or Return of the Jedi in front of you and you're going to watch one of them. I will go to Return of the Jedi. I will go possibly to Superman 3. One thing I like about Superman 3, it doesn't have... It slightly has lost that production weight that the first two had. And I don't mean the quality, but the problems the film had. In Superman 3, they finally got the director that the Salkinds wanted. There's no... And I think it has a slight bounce to it, Superman 3, that's not there in the first two films.
Yeah. And I think as well, it was that, other than whatever the issues were in terms of Lois, just by not having her there, which sounds awful, but you've got new people who weren't involved, and really the only main lead, was Christopher Reeve, and a couple of the supporting characters, and then a whole new idea, and I think it just seemed to benefit from that obviously with the fourth one they certainly tried to go back to the roots, for better or worse, and I mean that's a whole other podcast of course, but I mean this one, even when I know Sky, they tend to show the 4 Christopher Reeve films in a row before I know, and I don't get a lot of time to watch TV, especially during the day, but I quite happily, Superman 3's on, it's halfway through, I might as well just watch the end.
Yeah, and there's still that, I hark back to September 85 when it was first on ITV, but that was an era which we don't really have anymore of mass watching, and I still like to watch a bit of a Bond or a bit of a Star Wars or Superman on telly without it knowing they're going to be there, knowing that it's live. And it's difficult in the 58 million channel era. Back in the day, everyone was watching Superman 3 that Wednesday evening. I remember it. But I will always watch a bit, and it's not quite the same on like Netflix where if other half's cooking dinner on a Sunday, I'll just sit on the sofa and I'm like, I'm just gonna put something on. I might fall asleep to it, but it's not the same when you put on like an old retro thing just to sort of have as wallpaper.
No, and it's of course best when you dig out an old video and it's still got the original adverts on as well,
which I so judiciously punched out to save, because saving tape space was like getting Neil Armstrong back. It was a precision scientific, I was like a NASA technician sweating that I would punch the adverts out at the right time. And now sometimes if you find a VHS tape and more so if you've got the technology to play it, those ads are just amazing. And how they advertise those films, I mention it in the book and elsewhere. There was those Christmas ads for ITV movies in the 80s, which, and join Sigourney Weaver on board the Nostromo for the world premiere of Alien, and watch Gene Hackman fight Christopher Reeve on the streets of Metropolis in Superman 2. And they are out on YouTube, and I will send them to you. They're just, it's a different era. It's completely...
So proper.
And seeing adverts for like Rumbelows and radio rentals, and it's a different era. We're now becoming the old Jarrells sat in the Krypton bar here, sort of reminiscing.
But again, I remember, I found an old tape of Star Wars, and I'm not sure how much I saw, but I did fast forward to the adverts just out of curiosity, and it had those like MFI and things like that. It was just classic.
Because they were always on at Christmas and bank holidays, which all those big furniture warehouses would have their sales the next day. So yeah, you're right. It was always MFI, Dixon's, Leatherworld, or something.
World of Leather, yeah.
And then a Bob Carolgees ad for Hellman's mayonnaise, just to use up those Christmas bits. But Superman was key. Those Christopher Reeve films were key to my Christmas childhood. It was Bond in the afternoon on Christmas Day, and then perhaps a few days later or New Year's Day they would show Superman 1 or 2, and they were, and once you put all the ad breaks in those style kind of films, they would go on for about 5 days, so you'd have this sort of great day and night of Supermanness on ITV, and I kind of miss that analog Salkind era a lot, but Yeah, we still got Superman films.
You can see why they split them into two. I mean, I don't think this one got that so much of that treatment, but I definitely remember those deleted scenes that were on the Blu-ray being in the film when they were on ITV. And I know that with the first film, they split it into two over 2 nights so that they could sell 2 lots of adverts and everything. And everything's about making a few extra dollars. But yeah, this one was definitely one that obviously dragged, because I mean the playtime on the Blu-ray was just over 2 hours. And I imagine you could make that, chuck a few extra minutes in, then you've probably got an extra, I don't know, half hour's worth of adverts on that as well. So, yeah,
they were big epics. Yeah, and that was the point as well. They wanted it to be a big Hollywood epic. You know, when Superman was made in, production kicked off in '76, they were billing it almost as a biblical epic. Hackman, Brando. It was often Ned Beatty.
Jackie Cooper and
it was never Christopher Reeve. He was sort of kept at bay, because they wanted Superman to be unknown, and rightly so. And then later, because Dudley Moore they wanted for Superman 3, there was the whole thinking of having him as one of the other villains, and that idea then became Santa Claus the movie, or Superman 3.5 as we should really call it. So,
I wonder if, because they put Peter Cook in Supergirl, I wonder if one of them caught a bit of Derek and Clive and just thought, they're really funny, let's get them in Superman film.
I'm just thinking Derek and Clive recording on set at Pinewood. Yeah, they're crossovers.
Yeah.
Hang on, 83, Supergirl filmed around 83. I think Santa Claus was probably the year later, though, a bit later. But they're all big Pinewood productions.
Yeah, I think at that point they hated each other, didn't they? But even so, you'd have had him calling, I don't know, Superman, you fucking cunt.
Oh God, yeah, you could. I love Peter Cook in Supergirl. I've said this a lot, but the best moment in Supergirl, and a friend of ours in America, he's a performance artist, and he was judging the film as a performer, and he said the best scene is when Faye Dunaway opens the door and sees Peter Cook wearing that silver sort of, I don't know, like Italian jumpsuit Baco foil thing, and she scans him up and down like, what the fuck are you wearing, Nigel? And I love him in that film, and he's so bitter against everything. He hates the girls because they're young. He hates the women because they've got some skills he hasn't. And he's brilliant in that film. None of it makes any sense. It's slightly ridiculous, but when I was 9 watching Supergirl and also in fact, I sorry to bang on here, but the first time I saw Superman 3 was the same day I saw Supergirl at the cinema.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, because I saw it up in Glasgow at the Odeon that's no longer there, and we then went to some cousins for tea, and they had this miraculous miracle box called a VCR, which we didn't have for another year, and they said, let's go and rent out Superman 3, and I remember going to the store, and that cover it had some great artwork, Superman 3, with Superman sort of swooping out of the computer bank thing. And I remember we never watched it all, so I never really saw it. And that was I never saw Superman 3 at the cinema, sadly.
Yeah, I think I've seen all of them at the cinema, because I saw Superman 4, was it because John sorted it out? I went to see that. And
oh, you were there that night?
I was there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but I think the third one's the only one I haven't seen. I suppose maybe there isn't the appetite for that, but yeah, maybe that should be the next campaign.
Come on, BFI, you're listening. Let's do Actually, why not do a Superman retrospective? There must be some anniversary we can.
I saw the Donner cut of Superman 2 at the BFI, so they must have. I mean, there weren't many people there, but surely it must be somewhere.
There'll be some prints of it.
Yes.
Although some kinds they were. I don't want to keep knocking them. I don't even know them, and they made great pieces of cinema, but I know that some of their legalities and the contracts have slightly clipped the wings of some of these films in terms of where they're seen later.
But I guess they all sit with Warner now, don't they? But
Yeah.
Anyway, Mark. Now, as we touched upon before, I know in a lot of your other pod appearances that I've heard, you've talked about Catching Bullets, which is your memoir of being a James Bond fan. Now, the book that you've touched upon a lot here is Watching Skies. Now, obviously there's quite a bit of Superman in there, but what else is in there for anyone who might be looking at it?
Okay, well, the full title is Watching Skies, Star Wars, Spielberg and Us. I did want to get Superman in there, but it was just becoming too long on any Google search. It would never be found. But it's looking back at a window of cinema that was quite a small window of cinema, 75 to 84. I'm writing it. I get to decide that's a time zone. I didn't even want to go to 85 because it confused the narrative a bit. I also wanted to do a book that was a prequel to Catching Bullets, so I didn't want to step on the year's toes too much because I've done that. I've been there. But it looks at Jaws, E.T., Close Encounters, Star Wars, Superman. I sort of do Superman 1, 3, and Supergirl. I obviously give some love to Superman 2, and I would have gladly done a whole big loving chapter on that film, but the space becomes a problem. But it's just looking, to answer your question, it's looking at not just those films are great because they're in our minds and our childhood as great, of course they are, but they were a lot more important than that. You know, how Star Wars came out in the summer, and Jaws as well, actually Jaws more so. Jaws changed so much. It didn't just change American cinema, it changed what time of year films were put on, and then suddenly the summer became a platform for big blockbusters. Jaws famously was the first film that was coined a blockbuster, and Superman to me very importantly sits in that bracket. You know, Superman was part. It's the same with E.T. and Star Wars, that it was as important in the early to mid 80s to have a cordless telephone, a VCR, a car with a sunroof, and a copy of Superman the movie on VHS. Those were the expected societal aspirations. I'm not joking either. That was important. It would be like, my mate Greg, his dad's uncle has got a VH or beta copy of Superman 3. You're like, oh my God, it's like, This is witchery. So I'm going back. I take I frame it with my personal remembrances. I actually, when I go into the Superman films, I met Christopher Reeve, which I should have said a lot earlier, actually. I was Guildford High Street, March 85. He was performing in a play at the local theatre before it transferred to the West End, and he was walking towards me on the cobbled streets of Guildford High Street, and no one else had seen him. I'm like, I was on my own as well. I was like 9 and a bit, and I was probably going off to buy more Gamorrean guards from the bargain basement Star Wars bit in Tesco. But I saw him, and I was 9 years old, and you don't talk to strangers even if they are actually Clark Kent. And just before I could sort of get his attention or smile at him, he'd gone or turned a corner, and I wasn't quite sure that moment had happened. But and I became quite Superman fixated and made my own cape, and the book goes into that. So it's looking at those films again, looking at why they're important, but also why were they important to our lives, not just watching movies, but our lives, and how much they, like we've said, look how many examples we've given of how they've dented our trips to New York and wedding photos. These films burnt into popular culture for lots of reasons, and that's what I look into.
Superb. Well, let's say your website is markoconnell.co.uk.
That's right.
And your Twitter is Mark0Connell. As we discussed, some prick got there first.
Someone nabbed it first, but yeah, that's fine. Yeah, just if you do hashtag watching skies or even hashtag catching bullets, all hashtags lead to me and Rome.
Mark, thank you very much for joining us.
No, thank you.
Cheers. This episode is brought to you with executive producers Gary West, Fergus Higginson, Keith Foster, Jimmy Fletcher, Mark Drakes, Matt Cunnington, Christian Dees, Andy Elliott and Chris Hopkins, and associate producer Chris Oakley. Visit patreon.com/Betamax Video Club for more information about bonus episodes, early access and more. Don't forget to subscribe, rate and review the podcast on iTunes.